evening. And I want to thank you for attending our November 16th special meeting on our candidate selection. May we all rise, face the flag, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Trustee King.
We're here.
Roll call, Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Candelaria.
Present.
And Trustee Mamala is also present. Let the record reflect that all 4 trustees are present. Item number 2, we will begin the interview process. You will have 5 minutes.
Speaking to the mic, he said, speaking to the mic.
I'm sorry. You will have 5 minutes to answer each question. We are going to begin. We would want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and what do you know about the school city of Hammond. So we'll start with Mr. Sulzno.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you, Superintendent Miller and members of the board.
Microphone.
I appreciate it. I've been a resident of Hammond for 39 years.
Yeah, speak more to the phone.
Resident of Hammond for 39 years. Originally, we moved out Tapper Avenue and eventually worked our way over to Forest Avenue. I grew up on the southeast side of Chicago. Graduated St. Francis de Sales in 1975. Attended Chicago State University, where I received my Bachelor in Business Administration with a concentration in accounting, a minor in finance, and graduated in December of 1977 while working full-time. Also in August of 1977, I married my high school sweetheart, and we've been married 42 years. Together, we coached the high school hockey team for 15 years, which was very eventful. I began my working career with Coopers & Lybrand, which back then was one of the Big 8 accounting firms. I started with them in January of 1978, right after I graduated, and I worked in the audit division. Left in July of 1979 and began working for a company called the Naylor Pipe Company. We're a manufacturer of steel pipe. We can make pipe anywhere from 4 inches in diameter all the way up to 8 feet, and we can go as thick as a 1/2-inch wall steel. Company is 94 years old. Currently, I have about 60 employees, and I'm the 4th president in 94 years. I began my career there as a cost accountant, worked my way up to controller. Then in 1992, I became the treasurer. 97, I became the treasurer and chief operating officer. 1999, I became the president. And in 2018, I was elected chairman of the board. So I'm currently president, treasurer, chairman of the board, and I'm acting VP of sales. Over my tenure with Naylor, I have negotiated 10 3-year contracts with the United Steelworkers of America. Outside affiliations over the years, I was chairman of the board of the Calumet Area Industrial Commission in 2005. A board member for Tri-City Mental Health from 2007 to 2011. Currently on the St. Francis de Sales Big Shoulders Work Study Commission. Member of the Association of Women in the Metals Industries. member of the Minnesota Mining Association. I've stayed active with the city through the City Council and through the Flood Commission, which my wife has been very active in. I also taught night school at St. Francis de Sales from 1977 to 1978. What do I know about the Hammond School District? I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks, I'll tell you that. There's not a minute that goes by that there's not a story, that there's not a radio program. When I first thought about doing this, I attended the PowerPoint presentation, of course, and caught up very quickly with that, and then I did go to Gavitt the other night to find out what the citizens' reactions were. It's been a very interesting time, and it's going to get more and more interesting, and I'd like to be a part of that.
Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Daggett?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning to this board and
Morning.
to those who have attended this morning. I'd just like to issue an initial concern that the choice of the day and time of this meeting, it was not conducive to the community to be here and to be involved. I think Saturday morning was probably not a good idea. We want to make sure that the community has every opportunity to participate, so I just want to offer that as for all future consideration. My name is Colonel Antonio Daggett. I'm a retired United States Army colonel, over 30 years of military service. My wife and I, we are proud residents of Hammond, Indiana. During the course of our being here, we've reared our 10 children. I thank God for her. She's given birth to all 10 of my children. We have 8 boys and 2 girls. One son is a graduate. Well, we have 2 graduates now, Valpo, computer science and chemistry and biology. We have another one who's a graduate of Tuskegee, mechanical engineering. Another son who's also a graduate of Yale University in biology. So education is very important in our home, obviously. I am in the process of completing my PhD, a few credit hours from completing my PhD in educational leadership at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I've recently passed the state superintendent's exam as of 2018, January, and have passed the principal's license in 2 states. I'm a licensed principal in Indiana as well as in Illinois, and of course a teaching certificate as well. I believe that education is extremely important. I think my background indicates my commitment to education. My undergraduate degree is in accounting from DePaul University. I'm a certified standardized testing person, able to administer all of the standardized tests, licensed through Bob Jones University on that. And so as a result, education has played a very important part in what we do. Part of the reason I'm here, of course, is I'm very interested in playing a part in being on the board as a trustee. This won't be the first time I've come before this board. I've laid my qualifications out. But additionally, I want to announce this morning that I am a candidate for the congressional district in Indiana, District 1, to replace Pete Visklowski, who has decided not to run again. So that would be in conjunction with the work that I'm doing on behalf of the board as well. I think public school needs a really strong shot in the arm here in Indiana, and particularly in Congressional District 1. And I am committed to public education as a public educator. I believe it is a mistake to close Gavitt and to close Clark because I believe that what we are going to do is we're going to ultimately replace them with charter schools. And in my mind, that goes against the quality of education that we need for our public schools. I still believe that public education is the best avenue for educating the masses of people in this country. And I'm committed to public education. And I think that anyone who is at the helm now as a trustee or as a congressperson should be committed to public education in this country, in this nation. Public education got us through World War II. And public education will continue to strengthen this nation if we are committed to public education financially as well as emotionally as well. So of our 10 children, all of them have been educated in public schools. 5 of them are graduates of Gavitt, 2 of which are computer science and mechanical engineering persons as well. So I know that public education can be effective when it is supported. My concern with charter schools is that it is basically a process to resegregate our educational system in America. That's a problem. And I think that's what charter schools have been used to do at a time when we are so desperately in need of a strong educational system as we compete with places like Russia and China, who are producing engineers, physicists, chemists. We need to undergird and re-support our public education system. I had a discussion with the Indiana Superintendent, Jennifer McCormick, in her office there in Indianapolis, and we sat down and we talked about that. I see her new legislative initiatives, and I can't help but believe that at the heart of those things is the motivation to allow more charter schools to come into areas within Indiana, particularly Hammond as well. So I am committed to public education, and that's why I'm here this morning.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Daggett. Mrs. Veronica Garcia.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, trustees. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Veronica Garcia. I'm a proud Indiana public school teacher for 17 years. I have lived in Robertsdale with my husband for over 16 years. He's also an educator, public schools as well. We have 2 children who are currently enrolled in Hammond Public Schools. So my knowledge is not only being a resident, but being a mother, a proud mother of 2 children who are currently in the system and who are thriving, a 4th grader and an 8th grader. I have a bachelor's degree from Purdue University in social studies education with a focus in economics, government, and U.S. history, and a minor in Spanish. I have a master's degree in organizational leadership and management from Calumet College of St. Joseph. I have a background in economics, budgeting, and finance courses, as well as dealing with students, parents, and stakeholders alike as a teacher and as a parent. I'm active in our community. I'm a proud Taekwondo mom. Both of my kids compete at UTC in Robertsdale. My son plays baseball for Lake Shore. I'm a member of St. Casimir Church. I'm involved in my sorority and community service events that they do. As a teacher in Indiana, I'm fully aware of the limitations that tax caps and recent legislation has affected budgetary issues across the state in every district. I know how the new graduation pathways, how the new iLearn implementation focuses a lot of added responsibilities for the district without necessarily a plan or support system. So I think that this knowledge and understanding is vital when it comes to policy making and decision making as a member of the board. I also am aware of how school budgets affect the decisions of operations daily, how it affects our students, our teachers, our staff, our buildings. So due to this knowledge, I feel that I can be an asset to the board. I'm passionate about education. I graduated from East Chicago Central in 1989 as a valedictorian of my senior class. And everybody said, "You're gonna be a teacher? What a waste." Absolutely not. I completely disagree. I have gone on to teach AP Government, U.S. History. I've taught Economics Honors, AP Spanish. I'm a published author, having written a book for high school students to be successful in the AP exam. I'm an advocate for children and for successful learning experiences across the board. I also believe in Hammond schools. I chose to enroll my children in the school city of Hammond because of all of the fantastic things that are happening here. The one-to-one education technology initiative, the fact that they implement Google Classroom. My daughter is involved in National Junior Honor Society. My son was recognized at the school board meeting last year for Science Olympiad. They're involved in the TRIO program. Hammond schools have many successes. I think as a demographic, we tend to focus on the negativity, but there's a lot of great things happening, and I want to be a part of the successes, and I want to continue to support Hammond schools, Hammond students, and Hammond teachers across the city. So I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Now we will proceed with each candidate asking interview questions. And we will begin with Trustee King.
This is for all of our candidates. What experience do you have with budgets?
Mr. Sewell's no.
My experience with budgets is from corporate and working to begin with as an auditor. I've examined and reviewed a number of different companies and how their budgeting processes worked in the profit and non-for-profit side. Beginning with the Naylor Pipe Company, starting as a controller and working my way up from there, I deal with budgets every day. Each line item, as you go through a manufacturing process, has to be looked at on a daily basis, not only from costs, but from efficiencies also. I think that it can apply very heavily into the type of budgeting that is done here at the school district. I'm also familiar and have reviewed the budgets for the city of Hammond over the last few years and found very interesting differences between corporate and governmental. And I think it's something that I'm very, very good at. Actually have talked with a number of the people from Hammond regarding the budgets, so I feel like I have very good experience in working with them.
It's the same question for everyone, right?
Yeah. We'll be asking the same questions
Very good.
to each candidate.
Just wanted to make sure you were done.
I'm
with
sorry.
that. Had your attention.
Reverend Daggett.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lieutenant-
What experience do you have with budgets?
All right. I've had extensive experience with budgets. I've indicated my undergraduate degree is from DePaul University. I have an accounting degree. Subsequently to completing that accounting degree, I was hired by the Internal Revenue Service as an IRS agent. And my responsibility was to look into corporations, not-for-profits, school districts, things along those lines, to help those districts determine exactly what was needed for them to be effective in their operation. On the educational side, as a school district superintendent now, I've gone through those budgets that basically underline a school district, looking at property taxes and looking at the new situation that's going to be affected with caps here. I think it's important, particularly important, that the budget reflect the priorities of the community. The budget should not reflect the priorities of board members. It should not reflect the priorities necessarily of the superintendent. It should reflect the priorities of the community. The community should be able to look at a school district budget and see that its priorities are being supported by that budget. For instance, case in point, one of the things that I think would help our budget greatly here in Hammond would be what's called breakfast on the go. And basically what this allows is it allows for those students who are arriving late at school in the morning to still be able to grab breakfast even though the cafeteria has closed. Many of the schools districts in northern Illinois, up in the northern portion of Illinois, are using this very thing. And it ensures that a student gets breakfast even though he or she may be late. That's critical because it allows, the studies and research have shown us, even through my own research, has shown that when a child has breakfast, they are much more focused when they are in the classroom. So it is important, it is extremely important that when we look at a budget, we are looking for the priorities being reflected in that budget, and they should be the priorities of the community. I believe that my background, as I've indicated, as a person who has extensively looked at budgets, I'm also a certified, what's called a CFE, which is a Certified Forensic Examiner. allows me to look at not only what the budget says, but what it should say. And sometimes those things are different. A CFE is capable of going back to what we call the source documentation, the actual transactions, to determine whether or not that budget is reflecting exactly what is going on, if it's presenting a clear picture. The difference between a CFE and a CPA cannot attest to any fraud that may exist in that budget. A CFE can say, yes, I believe that there's fraud in this budget and should be looked at extensively. So I think what we need is someone who can make sure that the budgetary situation is clearly reflecting the priorities of this system. And I think we need the support from the congressional level. I think, we've heard it said that all politics is local. Well, it is until it isn't. So we need the congressional support. And as I've shared, my desire at this point, I'm running for Congress in District 1 here in Indiana, because whether I'm on the trustee board or whether I'm in Congress, I intend to support the Hammond school system. And I intend to do that at the highest level possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Veronica Garcia?
Well, my experience with budgets, aside from the world of academia and education, is I'm a mom living on a teacher salary, so I can stretch a dollar. But as an educator, I really understand how grant writing is important and how funds are allocated in the schools. Sometimes people from the outside can look in and say, well, there's all this money in the Title I fund, why isn't that used for X, Y, and Z? Funds are allocated and earmarked for certain events in education. So there's a difference between grant writing and general funds and special education funds and Title I funds. And that is an experience that I understand, and I can offer experience as far as understanding those budgets. Now, I don't have I have an economics eye as far as budget analysis, and I have taken numerous accounting courses, but other than writing grants for my students or home budget, that limits it. So sometimes an outside eye is a benefit, but like I said, due to my educational background, I can definitely understand school funding and school budgeting. So, thank you.
Thank you. We will proceed with question number 3. Trustee Candelaria.
Mr. Zono, in your professional experience, how do you go about making decisions?
Making decisions at a corporate level changes, especially with a corporation that I lead today. With 60 employees and 9 pipe mills in a factory, everything changes with a phone call. So we're always putting out fires, which is not a bad thing. What it does is it helps my customers get the product they need when they need it. And I think that it can apply into the school board also. You're seeing fires right now that need to be put out. And that's going to change from day to day, from year to year, and they have to be looked at very carefully. Remember, the stakeholders are the citizens, and that's what we have to look at and pay attention to. So I believe that staying on top of things, making the changes we need to make, and sometimes you make them on the fly, but it works.
Mm.
Same question.
Alrighty. Collaboration is always the key in any element of effective decision-making. The ability to collaborate with others, recognizing the fact that the individual who's making the decisions may not have all the facts in and of themselves. So you have to seek collaboration. You have to seek information from other sources to help you prepare in making a decision. As a United States Army colonel, over 30 years of military service, I had to take into consideration decisions that were being made that would affect people's lives. When you have that kind of gravity, in making a decision, you want to make sure you have every possible facts available. You want to make sure you have the materials you need to get that decision done, because you know your decision can save lives. I think that same collaboration is just as important in the educational arena as well, because we're talking about the educational lives of our children, their futures, their ability to be productive citizens in the community in which we live. I didn't serve 30 years in the military to come back and deal with situations that are detrimental to our children. And as I shared before, I believe that when we look in terms of charter schools, and I really believe that that's the ultimate motivation of the closing of Gavitt and the closing of Clark. I think we are on the verge of possibly seeing an expansion of charter schools in Hammond. And research has shown us that charter schools actually resegregate a community. That's a problem. That's a problem. So again, by gathering information, collaborating, checking sources and information, then I think we're in a better position to make decisions. No one should make a decision in a vacuum and feel that somehow they're doing what's best for kids. We've got to be willing to hear all voices, all stakeholders, all parents, teachers. You know, our teachers have committed themselves to the educating of our children. There's no question about that. We must make sure that they are playing a viable role in any decisions that are being made. I believe that as I've shared, I'm a strong supporter of the public school systems, and I'm a strong supporter of unions. I believe in unions. My parents raised 10 of us on a union salary. So I believe in unions. And I believe that public education is the lifeblood of an effective democracy. If we want to make sure that we can compete in years to come against other nations, we have got to make sure that our public school system is strong. We do that by collaborating at the federal level, the state level, and the municipal level. It's an all-hands-on-deck approach if we're going to make sure that this nation can remain at the forefront of education.
Well, when it comes down to making decisions for me personally in both my professional career and at home, I do a cost-benefit analysis. So I definitely weigh all of the options, the pros, the cons, what will come out of it, what is the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario. As an educator, a lot of my decisions for my students, whether it be what new textbook to adopt, what new program to implement, what new group we're going to start, or what field trip we'll attend, it's all based off of data-based, even, and sometimes budgetary issues. Can we afford to do this? I believe that decision-making has to take into consideration all of the stakeholders, all of the students. How will it affect the student from the kindergarten level all the way up to the high school, from all ends of the community, as well as the parents? How will our decisions affect the parents? They're not only the taxpayers, but they're the ones who choose to enroll their students here. With so many options now, and the state supporting school choice, we have to appeal to the parents and explain to them why our schools are an asset and why they should choose our schools. So when I have to make a decision, I focus on what would be the best possible outcome and to what end. So not only for our students, for our parents, for our teachers, for our staff, for the community as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will proceed with question number 4, Trustee Miller.
Mr. Zelno, what is the responsibility of a school board member?
The responsibility of a school board member, I believe, is setting up, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Setting policy and making sure that those policies are being followed and that they're being reviewed by the board, okay? We are not here to administer, which is something different from I'm used to, because not only am I setting policy, but I'm administering that policy. So it would be interesting to see and work with the fact that you're setting policies, you're making sure these policies are being followed. It's laid out quite well in the board documents and the mission statement, and that's what we need to follow. So that's what I would say to that one.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Daggett.
Yes.
Would you like me to repeat the question, or?
No, not at all. Thank you so much, though. Appreciate that.
Sure.
The purpose of the school board is to, and I echo what the previous candidate has indicated, that it is to set policy, to establish policy. It's a legislative body, if you will, of the system, and it's expected to set policy. It's not the school board's responsibility to actually operate the school system on a day-to-day basis. That is up to the superintendent, and we expect that he and his staff, along with working with teachers and custodials and all those who make up the faculty and staff, will actually do the running of the system on a day-to-day operation. However, the policy established by the school board need to reflect the priorities of the community. The school board is not an entity within it in itself to determine from on high, if you will, what they think is best for the school system. They need to be guided. The school board needs to be guided by the priorities within the community. And the only way they can do that is by getting feedback from the community, which is why I'm concerned about this gathering taking place at a time which was obviously pretty inconvenient for the community, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. The school board has to make a better decision than that. They have to make it available, look at the possibility of making it available for as many individuals to participate as would desire to do so. So I believe, again, I think the calling of the school board is to establish that policy, work with the superintendent. I would like to think that there would be a cohesive relationship between the superintendent and the school board, but making sure that, in fact, the priorities of the community are being carried out. The school board should not be politically motivated. It should be based on what's good for the students, good for the children. It should not be politically motivated. And because what's at stake here, ladies and gentlemen, is something that unless we get our hands around, we will not be effective, and we will not be able to establish the kind of up-and-coming community that's important. And let me just say one other thing to this. A workforce in any community that allows industry to come and establish itself in any community is looking for a strong, educated workforce. So the basis of the school board to ensure that we have a strong, educated workforce in this community will drive the economic engine of this community. We need the board to make sure that we have a strong, educated workforce so industry will find it appealing and find it economically to their advantage to come and establish industry and jobs here in the community. The board can have such an impact on that by making sure that we have a strong workforce, a strong educated workforce, and as we are educating our young people to become a part of that workforce. So your role and responsibility is absolutely essential to making sure that we have a strong economic system taking place here in Hammond, Indiana.
Thank you. Mrs. Garcia, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, it's fine.
All right, thank you.
My understanding of school board responsibilities definitely fall under the mission statement of the school board. It's to promote the highest educational attainment. So you definitely review policy, you review superintendent recommendations, you approve fundraisers, hiring, enacting certain policies, reviewing budgets. Like my candidate partners here have said, you don't oversee day-to-day operations. That is definitely up to the people we've entrusted as our educational leaders in the buildings and our superintendent. So I'm fully aware of the school board responsibilities and the oftentimes challenging decisions that you are faced with. So I'm fully prepared to represent the community and parents in doing so.
Thank you. We will now proceed with question 5. Trustee King?
Thank you. Describe your view of the roles of the school board and the superintendent. Second part, what is the ideal relationship between these two offices?
Okay, if I'm understanding the question, I believe the role of the superintendent is to run the day-to-day operations of the school system. And again, the board itself remains here to take care of policy and make sure that the superintendent is following those policies. Now, the relationship you should have with the superintendent should be very vocal. We need to speak to the superintendent and go through things that happen in the school on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the policies that this board has set are actually working or need to be changed. Without that review, you can have tons and tons of policies that don't work. And unless that superintendent can let us know what is working and what is not working, this is not going to happen. You won't have that integration between the two. Communication between the superintendent and this board is critical. Without it, it will fail.
Reverend Daggett, same question, please.
Okay, Ms. King, will you repeat that question, please?
Describe your view of the roles of the school board and the superintendent. What is the ideal relationship between these two offices?
All right, very good, thank you. Thank you for the question, Ms. King. As I shared previously, the role of the school board is basically to legislate, to establish policies, make sure those policies are being carried out. The role of the superintendent, obviously, is to run the day-to-day operations of the school district and system. What this does is it allows for an effective movement of our young people through an educational process that allows them to prepare themselves for the future. This relationship, although we want this relationship to be a cohesive relationship, there must be an element of distance to some extent with the board and the superintendent. Reason being, the board hires and fires the superintendent. So therefore, there must be an objective relationship. There still must be an objective enough to say to a superintendent, we need you to do a better job in this, or we need you to do a better job in that. When I say the relationship should be cohesive between the board and superintendent, I don't mean that the board should be a rubber stamp. And I want to emphasize that. The board's obligation is to the students, not to the superintendent. The education of our children is foremost because our nation depends on, again, an educated workforce. And again, as a military person, I can't help but refer to the fact that it is important to have such a workforce because it is an issue of national security that we make sure our children are properly educated to establish the defense and secure the defense of this nation that we love so much. So, although we expect a cohesive relationship between the board and the superintendent, communication has been indicated, I clearly agree with. There still must be an element of distance that allows the school board to say to the superintendent when he or she is not doing the job that has been expected of them. So, we can't allow ourselves to become too chummy, if you will, in that relationship where we are compromising the education of our young people because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. There's too much at stake. We've got too much at stake to allow that to color our thinking. And this is the education of our children and therefore the defense and sustainment of our nation. This is absolutely critical. So I do believe that there has to be communication. I do believe there has to be cohesion, but I don't believe that the school board should be a rubber stamp for anyone because our children deserve better.
Thank you. So I understand that the superintendent is the educational leader of the school district. They are in charge of the initiatives that are best forming to develop our academic goals and ensure educational programming. The school board then reviews policies, and the superintendent is the school board's only employee. Day-to-day operations are tasked to the superintendent, to the administrative leaders at the individual buildings. The school board's function is a oversight into policy and into budgetary issues, also to vote on those policies and determine whether or not the recommendations put forth are actually the best route to go and to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. We will proceed with question number 6, Trustee Candelaria.
Madam President, I'm sorry, quick question. We haven't rotated the order in which we're asking the candidates the question, and we're about halfway through. Is there any objection to anyone like rotating the order on the rest of the questions? As far as who we're asking, we always ask the same person the first question, and we're always asking the last person
Yes, we can do
the
that.
last question.
Sure.
Is there any objection to rotating the last 5?
How would you put your personal feelings aside to make the best decision for the district? Ms. Garcia.
So I would put my personal feelings aside, and as I previously stated, decision-making requires a cost-benefit analysis. You have to objectively look at all of the options, all of the possible outcomes, and what eventually will each decision lead to, whether that be budgetary, whether that be policy, whether it pertains to school closings. What is the decision that would have the best outcome for the greatest amount of students and for the school district as a whole? So as a teacher, it's very difficult to not be objective. You have to be objective with every student because every student comes with their own set of issues, and oftentimes their opinion or their mannerisms are vary from one's own way of speaking or believing. But as a teacher, I always treat each child fairly, and as a board member, I would treat each decision fairly. Every child deserves a fair education and the best possible education. So personal feelings would have to be put aside for the betterment of the entire school district.
You need me to repeat the question? Did you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, if you don't mind, please.
Okay. How would you put your personal feelings aside to make the best decision for the district?
Always the best way to put personal feelings, personal motivations, personal intentions aside is to be data-driven. Your decisions have to be based on data. And that data should be objectively attainable and therefore allow for anyone else to look at that same data and be able to determine why you made the decision that you did. I think often when we're not driven by data, that's when we find ourselves making decisions out of personal feelings and personal motivations. The data can be effective. The statistical analysis, the T statistics, the P statistics, the analysis of robust statistical analysis will allow us to put aside personal feelings and make those decisions just based on data alone. So I believe that the way I would put personal feelings aside is to look at the data. What is the data telling us? What is it telling us about the academic progress of our students? What is the demographic data telling us? Why is the achievement gap still so far apart after almost 60 years after Brown versus Board of Education? Why are we still looking at such a large achievement gap between our students? As a person who is, again, served 30 years in the military, been very involved with the Department of Defense schools, the DoD schools. It may surprise people in this room to know that the achievement gap in the Department of Defense schools is less than 4%. Just give you a moment to let that sink in. The achievement gap in the Department of Defense schools is less than 4%. That's within the margin of error. So it's clearly, our students can learn. We must focus on data. And that's one of the things that the Department of Defense School pushes very strongly, looking at the data, and therefore, I think we see the results there. My dissertation is on character-based leadership. And character-based leadership, as I'm presenting it in my dissertation, is based on the fact that you cannot be an effective leader if you lack character. That's the essence of it. This is something that I've espoused with our ROTC programs, our ROTC young people. We have a curriculum in the ROTC program that insists on character-based leadership. It's not enough to be academically sound, ladies and gentlemen. You have to have character. We see what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. Issues of character. Character-based leadership is critical. And so, again, personal feelings aside, to make decisions, you've got to have character. People who cannot make decisions for the good of all without putting their personal feelings aside, I have a question about their character. Because if we live in a representative form of government, a republic, then we expect those who represent us to put their personal feelings aside and make the decision that's best for us as a community and as a nation. Those things are critical. So that's the thrust of my dissertation for my PhD, and it's the thrust of my running for Congress in the 1st District here, because I believe that we must have a person who has character in their leadership approach.
Mr. Zono, did you need me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I think the question also deals with the fact that a strong leader in any business will explain to you very quickly, personal feelings do not get involved in any type of dealing, no matter what you're working on. You are going to run into areas where you're going to feel personally that someone is attacking you, someone is not being fair to you. I deal with that in the shop almost on a daily basis. A leader takes personal feelings completely out of the scenario. This is one very, very large business that's being run through this board, through the superintendent, through the cities. You cannot take things personally. If you do, you're not doing your best job for this board or for the school district. So I think leadership and the fact that as you become a leader, you learn more and more that personal feelings have nothing to do with running a business. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed with question 7. Trustee King.
Thank you. Please describe your experience with conflict resolution and consensus building. Let's start with Anna.
Mr. Daggett.
Okay. You, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. As I've indicated previously, I believe that conflict resolution often has a lot to do with a lack of communication. I think particularly in a setting like this, where we're all supposed to be committed to seeing that our students are capable of being able to compete in a global society. The reality is that competition now is no longer just across town. We're now competing in a global society. And so our ability to resolve conflict early, to put the fires out, as one of the candidates dubbed it earlier, is critical to making sure that we don't lose the momentum that's needed to move our young people forward. The problem often why conflict resolution does not take place as soon as it should is because of your previous question. People are often motivated by their personal feelings. When you remove your personal feelings from the situation, you can see more objectively what needs to be done. And particularly when we're talking about the educational lives of our children. I can't tell you how important it is, at least at the colonel, general, military level, that conflicts are resolved right away, that data is given and information is provided to make sure that that conflict is resolved right away so our men and women can do their job, whether on the battlefield or whether in the Pentagon, where I was lastly stationed, that they can do their job in a way that conflict does not keep them from doing that. What's the process then, therefore, for consensus building? You've got to hear everyone out. You've got to hear everyone out. When I do my briefings, when I was doing, and I shared with you my last duty station, I was in and out of the Pentagon, and many times finding myself briefing generals in regards to what was going on. And the consensus building has to be making sure that you're transparent. When people know you're transparent, they're willing to build with you. They're willing to establish a consensus with you when they know you're transparent. And the commitment to transparency, I think, plays a huge role in consensus building. I think that's critical. People want to know that what you say is what you mean. People want to know that you will stand behind your word, that your word is your bond. It represents who you are. It represents your reputation. And I think people are willing to build consensus with you when they know you are transparent. You're upfront. How do I go about consensus building? Through transparency. I think it's important for me to lay it all on the table. People can see what it really represents. There's no hidden agenda. Anything that I'm committed to, it's going to be clear. Why is that important to me? Particularly as a father who's raised 10 children, I want my children to be transparent. I want them to have the ability to build consensus. I want them to be able to have the communication skills to deal in conflict negotiations and get those things resolved. So why is this important? There's a lot at stake, ladies and gentlemen. And you have an enormous task, an enormous responsibility. You will be responsible for the education of children's lives and families going forward. You have to make the best decision for what's good for this board.
Thank you. I have experience in conflict resolution as a teacher almost daily, but also as a professional setting. I've been a department head for my department for the past 5 years, on and off over the past 17 years, dealing with various issues. I also believe that it's important that you listen to both parties, you hear them out, you write down each point and compare them. Compromise is necessary in all forms, be it a squabble in the classroom to policy discussions at the level of the city. It is important to compromise and have open communication. Decision-making is difficult, but when one is explained as to the rationale behind a decision, what the goals were, what the motivations were, what the outcome is, and why that decision was reached, that helps both parties to come to an understanding and to feel as if they were heard, listened, and they can see where both of their demands, maybe not all the way, but were openly listened to, openly heard, and even met. So that's the way I take part in conflict resolution. Thank you.
My experience with conflict resolution over the years has been relatively simple. You have to listen to people. What we end up running into is the fact that you'll have people who will not listen to both sides of what is going on with the conflict. They have it in their mind that this is the way it should be, and they don't listen to the parties that are having this conflict. And I found if you sit back as a leader and let people explain to you, and let people talk to you, and explain the entire situation, normally that conflict can be resolved and be resolved properly for both parties. If you do not listen to the people and get all the information that you possibly can before you make that decision, you'll be making the wrong decision. So I think communication and listening are the keys to conflict resolution.
Thank you. We will proceed with question number 8. Trustee King. I'm sorry, Trustee Candelaria.
Question number 8. Why should we consider you for this position? And who are we starting with?
Pardon?
Which candidate?
Trustee Trustee, not the Trustee Miller.
Ms. Garcia.
Mrs. Garcia.
Did you need me to repeat the question, or are you?
Yes, please.
Okay. The question is, why should we consider you for this position?
I feel that you should consider me for this position because I am 100% invested.
Excuse me, could you just?
Yes, ma'am.
pull
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
mic up? Okay.
Thank you. I feel that you should consider me for this position because I am 100% invested. I'm a parent, I'm a community member, I'm experienced in the realm of education, I understand budgets, I am I can give you the view of what it is to be a parent in the school city of Hammond. That's ultimately who we're serving, is our children. I feel that my experience as an educator, my experience in government and in the world of finance and economics can also provide a necessary experience when we're going over budgets and policy. I understand Indiana code in regards to education, funding, and budgets. I feel that I will have a lot to offer. I'm also a fair person. I'm respectful, I listen, and I can offer an educated and well thought out opinion and feedback. I will work diligently with you for the school city. I will work for the children, and I am a fair and honest voice. So I thank you for your time and your consideration. I definitely do hope that that you'll consider me. I feel that as a parent in the school city, I can give you that necessary view into what it's like as a parent, who's ultimately who we're serving. Thank you.
Mr. Zono, did you need me to repeat the question, or?
No, thank you. I think being on this board, I would bring some unique qualities that may be lacking with the educational experience that is on the board. I am bringing in strong leadership. I'm responsible right now for 60 employees and their families every day. Man doesn't make a paycheck, he comes home, he can't put groceries on the table, can't send his kids to school. It's very difficult out there. And it's difficult for everyone, be it an educator, be it a factory worker. So you have to look at that, and you have to bring people along with that leadership, which I believe, if you see my resume, that I've been doing that over the years. And I think that's number one that I could bring to the board. And number two, experience. I've been dealing with issues for the last 40 years. I've been with Naylor 40 years. And I've handled everything from union contracts to legal documentation, disciplinary actions, pretty much anything you can run into on a day-to-day basis with a corporation. Financial. I am responsible right now for all the financial dealings with the corporation. These statements are audited on a yearly basis by an outside audit firm, which, again, with the school city, you will go through that, I'm sure. Finally, credibility, transparency, and accountability. My jobs that I've done over the years would accept nothing else. these are the items I feel I could bring to this board. And I would like to thank you for your consideration also. It's a very interesting process, and I hope you consider me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like for me to repeat the question?
Sure, please.
Okay. Why should we consider you for this position?
I think that it is important that the next member of this board has enormously strong organizational skills. I believe the board has that, but I think the enhancement of that could be to the board's good. I am a person, obviously, I think just from looking at my background, high energy, highly organized. You can't really raise 10 children in this day and time. My wife and I, and complete a PhD as I'm doing, she completing her master's as she's already done. We are high energy, we are organized, we manage time very well. You almost have to in our circumstances. And I think that these things are critical to a board that's now facing, as the Indiana Public Superintendent said, new legislative initiatives. We need to be prepared for that. I can bring, obviously, my economic background, my financial background, my leadership skills, having led in this nation's United States Army for over 30 years, but also my communication skills and the ability to communicate what actually is taking place within the essence of the budget as opposed to what we believe is taking place. There's a big difference there, and I think those things are critical. I've indicated my financial background, obviously, my use of time. I think it's a way that we've been able to accomplish as much as we have in our lives because we use time effectively and well. I think at this particular junction, with what school city of Hammond will be facing in the not too distant future, I think we need someone who is going to be willing to be uncompromising when it comes to public education. I think that's something that you can count on from me. I will be uncompromising when it comes to public education. I don't think that compromise is always good if the result is not for the good of our children. I don't think we can compromise on public education. We must be committed wholly and solely to it. And we must make sure that our responsibility that the community has entrusted us with becomes the priorities that we seek for the education of our students. So I believe that I would be a great addition to the board. I think I would be able to provide data, information, statistical analysis that the board may not necessarily be aware is actually there sometimes. I think my background as a superintendent, as an individual who's passed a state superintendent exam, 2 principals licenses, I can look at a budget and I can tell you what the numbers say and I can tell you what they ought to say. And there's a big difference there. And we've got to be prepared to look below the surface at this point because funding is critical. The use of our dollars is absolutely critical. We know that we're dealing with a cap as it relates to property taxes and issues along those lines. So we really need to have someone who can do creative financing as well to help our school district move forward as well. So I think I believe I bring a myriad of skills and abilities I think that will be very beneficial to the board. Not to mention the fact, as a parent, 4 of my children are graduates of Hammond school system. I'm committed to the system. There's no question about it. I know that Hammond can produce top-notch students, have, and will continue to do so. But we must give the system, our system, the kind of credentialed individuals who can make a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last and final question, Trustee Miller.
Ms. Garcia, what type of policy changes would you like to see implemented? Possible areas of discussion might include behavior, dress code, or campus safety.
Thank you. Well, as a parent, one of the things that matters to me is school safety. I think that there's a lot of positive things happening in regards to the preparedness of the schools, but I think that in today's day and age, we can never be overly cautious. Another policy issue that I would definitely care about, passionately about, is our need to bring in, to attract staff. We have many school classrooms that have teachers on emergency permits, or we're being covered by substitute teachers. It's important that we attract qualified teachers and support our teachers to keep them here. This teachers that my children have encountered have been phenomenal, and it's important that we keep them as well. Our staff at Hammond are fantastic. I definitely would like to see that with the new graduation pathways, we encourage and focus on CTE programming as well. Our ACC is truly a gem, and it's something that we should continue to expand. HAPA is something that I would like to see grow as well, to meet the needs of those students who, while they may fall short of the requirements or the interest in like STEAM programs, HAPA can fill that need and help provide them with the support that they need to meet their academic goals, find the interest that they need in school so that we can ultimately get them to that graduation date. As well as college and career readiness, so that's something that those initiatives and those policies are something that as a board member I would want to support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zolno? Mr. Zolno?
Okay. I'd really like to comment on school policies. The only one I can really touch on right now, without becoming more and more familiar with the policies, is school safety. We've had another shooting just this week in California, and I am not certain exactly what policies we currently have set up in our schools. I know this has been a hot button topic, which it very well should be, to protect our kids while they're in school, and what is the best method to do that. Again, I'd like to comment further on policies, but I'm not going to fill you with a lot of fluff and just think of things out of my head thinking, well, I need to tell the board something. I need to review the policies and know the policies before I can comment on them.
That's good.
Lieutenant Colonel Daggett?
Yes, ma'am. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. What type of policy changes would you like to see implemented? Possible areas of discussion might include behavior, dress code, and campus safety.
There's no question that our students can't learn in an environment where they don't feel safe. No student can. One of the most important things, most important elements for us in 2003, when our nation went to deal with the issue of 9/11 and went into Iraq and Afghanistan, one of the most important things for us was to make sure that there was school safety in the schools in Afghanistan. That was a priority. To make sure that the students in Afghanistan could learn in a safe environment. And we come home and we find in our own land students that feel unsafe in their schools. Something is clearly wrong with that picture. The policy of school safety has to be everyone's responsibility. Before education can even take place, a child has to feel that they are in a safe environment. That's absolutely critical. Our policy could stand to be beefed up. There's no question about that. Are we doing everything we can economically? Probably to the extent of the funding, yeah, probably. But all that means is that we need to make sure that our budget is enhanced as it comes to school safety. No one wants to hear the news that we heard in California this past week. You don't send your children off to school and expect them to not return that same evening. So there's no question that our approach to this locally, at the state level, and at the national level, has proven has proven to be inadequate. I believe that we need to look at our school safety policy again. I think it's more important than our dress code, quite honestly. I think it's more important than some of the other elements. Safety has to be a #1 priority in our schools. And I think the process by going about that at this point is to make sure that we are consulting enough avenues to determine what will make our schools the safest possible. To me, it's incongruent that schools in Afghanistan would be safer in some instances than our schools here in the United States of America. Something's wrong with that picture. I believe we have to be committed to the safety of our schools and beef up the policy to make sure that we have an environment where our students can learn and feel comfortable in their learning.
I already answered it, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That completes our questioning. What we will now begin to do is the nomination selection of the next school board trustee. And what I will be doing, I will be asking each trustee, I will be going through the names, and they will be nominating each trustee with a vote of yes or no. Each candidate. I will begin with Trustee King. Your nomination vote for candidate Zulno.
Madam President, one point of clarification. Are we just, we're voting on one?
No, I'm going to ask each trustee to nominate, and I'm going to be going through all the names.
Okay.
And you will cast your nomination for each candidate.
So,
But
so we're voting, we can vote yes at one time for one candidate, or?
Yes.
so, a little confused as well, Trustee Miller. Sample. So if we go the first round, it could be over if the first person gets a majority vote.
Yes.
Without any consideration of the other two. Is that how we're doing it?
Yes. Trustee King. Nomination of candidate Zulno.
No.
Candidate Garcia.
Yes.
Candidate Daggett.
Now that's where I'm confused. If I say yes,
Pardon?
She had a question. She was saying if she says yes you can't have 2 yeses for the first vote.
She can have 2 yeses for the first vote.
oh, we can't? Oh, yes.
This is round 1.
I've already voted. I'm not sure we didn't do it like this last time.
Okay. Oh, I thought because we have less candidates this time. All right, we'll do it individually. Trustee King, candidate Zulno. Again, we're just going to do it individually then. No. Okay. Trustee Candelera, candidate Zulno.
Yes?
No, because your vote, trustee Blake King, was the first time trustee candidate Zuno, no. Candidate Garcia, yes.
Did trustee Miller vote?
Candidate trustee Miller, candidate Zuno.
Yes.
And trustee Mamala votes yes for candidate Zulno. Attorney Conrad, I have a question. We have made our decision, correct?
I'm confused. I'm not clear at all.
On your nomination, I think you probably need to have clarity with all of your trustees. I think what you're trying to ask is, from each one of the trustees, who would they want to nominate? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, by vote.
Okay, so then I think maybe if you present the question to each of the trustees, who is it that you would nominate into being the candidate, that might be a little bit more clear, so that you've got a clearer idea from all your trustees.
Because none of us had an opportunity to actually nominate a candidate.
Okay.
As we did before.
Okay. Okay. All right, trustee King, who would you like to nominate for a candidate?
Trustee Mamala, I nominate Veronica Garcia. And
Pardon?
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Veronica A. Garcia. I make a motion that Veronica A. Garcia be considered for the vacancy of trustee White.
If trustee is making the nomination, that there would be a vote.
Vote.
And then you would have to now take a vote on to whether or not you would select the candidate, Garcia, as filling that position. And you can take that as a vote. That's her motion, and then you would need to get a second, any discussion, and then take a vote on that.
Okay.
That would be, if the motion has been made, is that Ms. Garcia would fill the vacancy.
Is there a motion to nominate trustee Garcia?
Well, she's made the motion.
Oh, she made the motion.
And so
Is there a second?
they would have to be seconded before there
And
was a vote.
then we would all vote individually on the,
Well, there would have to be a second, if that's the motion. And so then there would need to be a second on the motion. If there's not a second on the motion dies. And then you have to go for another motion.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion? There's no second on the motion. Is there any discussion? The motion fails. Trustee Candelaria, what is do we have your nomination for a candidate?
my nomination for a candidate will be Mr. Zono.
Again, you would have to get a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
There has been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Voice vote, please.
Pardon?
Point of order, voice vote.
And actually, what Trustee King is asking for
Is there a roll
would
call?
be appropriate is to take the vote
Do a roll call.
By roll call.
Roll call
Makes
vote.
perfect sense in this situation.
Thank you.
That way.
Roll call vote. Trustee King.
No.
Trustee Candelaria.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
And Trustee Mamala votes yes. There are 3 yeses and 1 no.
That would be the decision of the board.
Yeah. That is the decision of the board by the majority vote that candidate Zulno has become the next trustee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.